So, right now, sitting beneath your operating system, running on this totally separate chip that you can't even see with network access you have zero control over, is essentially a master key to your entire digital life. And you aren't the one holding it.
Yeah, it's a pretty unsettling thought when you really stop to think about it.
Right. Like, I want you to just think about the laptop sitting on your desk right now or the smartphone in your pocket. You paid for them, you physically hold them, but do you actually own them? Or are you, basically just paying for the privilege of carrying around a tracking device that answers to big tech?
Exactly. And we're so conditioned to think about security as just software, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, I bought antivirus, I have a secure browser, I use a VPN. But the reality is that there are these massive invisible layers of control just baked into the devices before you even break the seal on the box.
And that structural flaw is totally the center of our mission for today's deep dive. We've got a really cool stack of sources today detailing how you can genuinely escape big tech, like taking back true digital sovereignty.
Which is so critical right now.
It really is. So we're exploring the specific hardware, the open source firmware, and these wildly intricate anti-tamper innovations from a company called NovaCustom. We're specifically looking at their PrivacyGuard and SecurityTitan series.
Because if you want true ownership, it has to be a ground-up approach. It starts at the physical hardware and the invisible code running beneath the OS. If that foundation is compromised, I mean, every piece of software you stack on top of it is just built on sand.
Built on sand. Exactly. Now, before we get into the mechanical weeds of how NovaCustom pours that concrete foundation, we really need to thank the sponsor making this deep dive possible. And it's actually incredibly fitting because the exact high-end security hardware we are unpacking today is the highly coveted second-place prize pack over at the CISO.poker tournament.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is fitting.
Right. That event is happening on August 5th, 2026, over at the Wynn Las Vegas. It's running right alongside the B-Sides LV, Black Hat, and DF Con Week. So, Hacker Summer Camp. We'll talk a bit more later about how you can actually get your hands on this tech, but a massive thank you to them for supporting the show.
It is honestly a phenomenal prize package for a crowd that truly gets it. I mean, to grasp why a whole room full of cybersecurity experts would covet this specific hardware, we have to talk about the fundamental flaws in just, standard off-the-shelf devices.
Right. Let's start with the brain of the computer. Most of us just push the power button and wait for Windows or Mac OS to load up. But there is an entire life cycle that happens before that screen ever even turns on.
Yeah, and that life cycle is governed by the BIOS, or the firmware. It's basically the code that controls the absolute deepest level of the hardware. In most normal computers, this firmware is entirely proprietary. It's closed source.
So a total black box.
Completely. The vendor keeps it secret.
Yeah.
But it's actually worse than just secret code because most conventional Intel-based systems contain this subsystem called the Intel Management Engine, or Intel ME.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Having proprietary firmware with an active Intel ME is essentially like having a landlord who keeps a master key to your apartment, right? And they install a hidden camera in your hallway, and they absolutely refuse to show you the blueprints to the building. You live there, but they have ultimate access.
That is a very accurate, if not slightly terrifying, analogy. Yeah.
But on a mechanical level, what is the Intel ME actually doing?
So the Intel ME is essentially a totally separate, highly privileged microcomputer running inside your main computer. It operates completely beneath your operating system.
Wait, really? So Windows has no idea it's there?
Windows, Linux, whatever, they are totally blind to it. And it has its own dedicated network access. It can even remain active when your computer is asleep. Because it's so opaque and has so much privilege, it is a massive, unauditable security vulnerability. You just have to blindly trust that it hasn't been compromised, which in cybersecurity is just a terrible strategy.
So NovaCustom's approach here is basically to stop trusting the landlord and just change the locks entirely. According to the sources, they replace that standard secret BIOS with something called Dasharo coreboot. It says Dasharo is this open source minimalistic firmware maintained by a Polish security firm called 3milibeb.
Right, but they don't just make the code visible. That's only part of it. They actively go after that Intel ME vulnerability.
Neutralize it, right.
Exactly. Across all their supported devices, Dasharo actually disables the Intel Management Engine at the firmware level. They use this thing called a Hesse hat bit.
Okay, I gotta pause you there because Hesse hat bit sounds like incredibly deep technical jargon. For the listener, what does that actually mean?
Oh, it's actually a fascinating piece of tech history. So HAP stands for High Assurance Platform. It's this undocumented feature that was originally requested by government agencies, like the NSA.
No way, the NSA.
Yeah, because they recognized that the Intel ME was a massive security liability for their classified work. They basically demanded a way to turn it off. And eventually, independent researchers discovered this hidden kill switch. So Dasharo utilizes that exact NSA-level mechanism to shut down that privileged subsystem.
That is wild. So they are leveraging actual government-grade mitigation for just everyday users. And because Dasharo operates at that root level, the sources say it also takes hardware control completely away from the operating system, like managing fan profiles, FN lock hotkeys, keyboard backlighting.
Yeah, completely OS independent.
But the coolest part to me is how it handles the battery. It prevents battery microcharging without even needing an OS utility.
Oh, that is crucial for device longevity. Usually, when a laptop is plugged in, the battery slowly drains a tiny bit and then recharges at the top end. And that constant cycling degrades the lithium-ion cells over time.
Right, which ruins your battery life after like a year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Dasharo intercepts that process at the hardware level. It sets strict charge thresholds to protect the battery's physical health, whether you're running Linux, Windows, or honestly no OS at all.
What's fascinating here is that Dasharo is also providing long-term auditability. By using this open source base, NovaCustom sets up verified boot, measured boot, and secure boot with built-in TPM 2.0 support.
And that mathematical foundation is just paramount. When we talk about measured boot and TPM 2.0, we're talking about a cryptographic chain of custody.
Yeah.
The TPM, the Trusted Platform Module, takes a unique mathematical hash. Think of it like a digital fingerprint of this firmware code before it executes.
So if something tries to mess with it...
Exactly. If a rootkit or some advanced malware tries to alter that deep code, the fingerprint changes. The TPM detects the mismatch, and the system flat out refuses to boot securely. It takes this opaque black box and turns it into a mathematically verifiable fortress.
Okay, so having a theoretically secure, mathematically verified fortress sounds like a dream for hardcore hackers and researchers. But we need to ground this a bit. If you're listening right now and you want to actually transition away from mainstream tracking, what does this hardware feel like to use? Let's talk about the PrivacyGuard ecosystem.
Sure. So the PrivacyGuard line really brings all these hardcore concepts into daily drivable hardware. They have the V54, which is a 14-inch laptop, and the V56, a 16-inch model. Both of them get up to 7 hours of battery life, which is honestly highly competitive for open firmware devices.
And they also have a desktop option, right? The NUC box.
Yeah, the PrivacyGuard NUC box mini PC.
I noticed the specs on that NUC box are surprisingly heavy for a privacy device. We're talking an Intel Core Ultra 5 processor, 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM, a 1 terabyte PCIe 4 SSD, and it supports up to 4 simultaneous displays. Why pack that much power into a tiny privacy PC?
Because true privacy often requires running local, intensive workloads. If you're compiling code or, say, running local large language models because you don't want to send your prompts to cloud AI providers.
Oh, that makes sense. Keep the AI local.
Exactly. Or if you're managing heavy encrypted databases, you need serious computational overhead. The NUC box is VESA mountable, so you can hide it behind a monitor, but it is a powerhouse private workstation.
Okay, I have to push back on this, though. Let's say I buy this hardware for my small business, and I hand a secure Linux machine to my accountant or just a standard office worker. Usually, if you hand an average user a Linux machine, they see an unfamiliar layout or terminal window, and they just panic. Isn't this way too complex for normal users?
That is, historically, the biggest roadblock for Linux adoption. But NovaCustom directly mitigates that friction. The software solution they pre-install on the PrivacyGuard series is Zorin OS Pro.
Okay, how does Zorin OS Pro actually solve the learning curve?
By heavily relying on muscle memory. So Zorin OS Pro is an open-source Linux distro, but its user interface is deliberately engineered to map perfectly onto the layouts people already know.
Oh, like Windows.
Yeah. Through this highly customized theming engine, a user can set the environment to look, feel, and act almost identically to Windows 11 or macOS. The start menus, the taskbars, the way the windows behave, it all feels entirely familiar.
So they don't even realize they're using Linux.
That's the goal, a zero learning curve transition. You get the underlying security of Dasharo and Linux, but you interface with it using the workflow you've literally spent a decade mastering.
Okay, that's incredibly smart. But securing your desktop is only a first step. It's kind of pointless if the device you carry into your bedroom, your car, and your office is quietly broadcasting all your telemetry to data brokers. So we have to talk about the smartphone in your pocket. The sources detail NovaCustom's mobile solution, which is the SHIFTphone 8.1.
And the mobile landscape is notoriously hostile to privacy, which makes the SHIFTphone 8.1 so remarkable. It runs on IoT OS, which is built on an Android 16 base, and it actually includes an IoT OS premium license by default.
What does the premium license actually do?
It gives you network-level reinforced tracking protection right out of the box. It analyzes and blocks malicious requests before they ever leave the device. And there are no ongoing subscription fees for it. But most importantly, it operates entirely independent of Google services.
Which instantly brings up the perennial smartphone question, right? If there are no Google services, how do you actually get your apps? I mean, I need my banking app, I need secure messaging.
Right. So the ecosystem relies on two pre-configured alternative stores. First is the F-Droid store, which is strictly curated open-source applications. But for your everyday commercial apps, you use the Aurora store. And the ingenuity of the Aurora store is its use of micro-G technology.
Okay, let's break down micro-G for a second, because that is a vital concept in the sources.
Micro-G is basically this open-source framework that spoofs Google Play services. So a lot of commercial apps will refuse to run if they don't detect Google's tracking framework on the phone.
They just crash on purpose.
Basically, yeah. So micro-G steps in and acts as a decoy. It tells the app, yes, Google services are here, everything is fine, which allows the app to function normally. But when that app tries to send your location data or telemetry back to Google, micro-G just hands back empty data or blocks the transmission entirely.
So you get to download standard apps anonymously, but you starve the trackers of their fuel.
Exactly. This brilliant digital judo.
It really is. But the physical hardware of the SHIFTphone 8.1 is what really caught my attention here. We are talking about dedicated physical hardware kill switches for the camera and the microphone. But wait, is a physical switch actually necessary? But an advanced malware just bypass a software toggle if it infects the root system?
Well, that is exactly the threat model a physical switch addresses. Because if an attacker gains root access to your device, they control the software. A software microphone mute button just becomes a useless graphic on a screen.
Right.
But the kill switches on the SHIFTphone 8.1 physically sever the copper circuit connecting the mic and the camera to the motherboard. It doesn't matter how sophisticated the malware is, code cannot jump across a physically broken electrical connection.
Wow. So it gives you absolute tactile certainty that you aren't being recorded. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you can't genuinely own your data if you don't possess the physical right to repair the device holding it. The sources emphasize that the SHIFTphone 8.1 features a completely glue-free modular design. Like, it literally ships with a screwdriver inside the box.
Which is such a radical departure from mainstream manufacturing. I mean, most companies rely on industrial adhesives just to keep users out of the device. But with the SHIFTphone, you can swap out modular components right at your kitchen table.
Yeah, it has a removable 320 milliamp hour battery. You can exchange camera modules or even replace the display, which is mounted on this interchangeable A-frame. It's a philosophy of long-term sustainability rather than, planned obsolescence.
Which is how tech should be built.
Definitely. Okay, so the PrivacyGuard line seems perfectly calibrated for escaping data brokers and taking back daily digital autonomy. But let's elevate the threat model. If you're listening to this thinking, well, I'm just a normal person, nobody is launching advanced attacks against me, you have to understand that the tools for espionage are getting so much cheaper. What if you're a journalist or an executive or handling trade secrets and you face targeted state-level cyber threats?
Yeah, that level of threat requires a totally fundamental shift in architecture. You move from the PrivacyGuard series up to the SecurityTitan series. This is where paranoia basically becomes a meticulously engineered feature.
Right, so instead of the user-friendly Zorin OS, the SecurityTitan laptops use Qubes OS. The sources note that NovaCustom actually partners with a Berlin-based firm called Bluenix GmbH to provide consulting and support for enterprise Qubes deployments. Why is Qubes OS considered the gold standard here?
Because Qubes OS utilizes extreme hardware-enforced virtual machine isolation. So think of a standard operating system like a large open-plan office.
Okay, open office.
If a malicious actor gets through the front door, say, they trick you into clicking a bad email link, they now have access to the entire floor. They can walk right over to your Procnol files, your passwords, your network settings.
And how does Qubes restructure that office?
It replaces the open floor plan with a submarine.
A submarine.
Yeah, Qubes compartmentalizes your digital life using hardware virtualization technologies, like Intel VTX. So your work environment runs in one virtual machine. Your personal browser runs in a completely separate, isolated machine. Your password manager exists in an offline vault with absolutely no network access.
So they are physically cut off from each other.
Exactly. They are separated by heavy, digital bulkhead doors. If your web browser gets compromised by some zero-day exploit, the attacker is trapped inside that single compartment. They literally cannot breach the bulkhead to access your offline vault or your work files.
But malware can be so incredibly persistent. Like, if I reboot the machine, how do I know the core system itself hasn't been quietly infected while the computer was off?
That leads us to boot attestation. On the SecurityTitan, they swap the standard Dasharo payload for a heads payload, and they pair it with a physical USB security device called the NitroKey 3A Mini.
How do those two pieces interact?
So every single time you power on the laptop, the head's firmware stops the boot process. It interacts with the plugged-in NitroKey and performs a cryptographic challenge and response. It's basically verifying the mathematical signature of the firmware. It asks the hardware, has a single line of code changed since the last time I booted?
So if an advanced threat actor, like say an evil maid in a hotel room, tried to alter the boot
The
code,
cryptographic signature would fail to match. The NitroKey flashes a warning, alerting you to the tamper before the compromised system even loads.
here's where it gets really interesting to me. NovaCustom doesn't just rely on digital verification. They have developed physical anti-tamper measures that literally sound like science fiction, specifically to combat supply chain attacks.
And supply chain interdiction is a massive blind spot for most organizations.
Yeah.
An attacker intercepts the package in transit, opens the laptop case, installs a microscopic hardware bug on the motherboard, closes it up, and the courier delivers it to you.
You're compromised before you even turn it on.
Exactly.
So to defeat that, NovaCustom utilizes these anti-tamper glitter screws. They coat the exterior screws of the SecurityTitan case in a specialized glitter nail polish substance. And as that substance dries, the various flakes of glitter settle to form this completely unique randomized 3D pattern on top of every single screw.
It is brilliant.
That.
It harnesses the unpredictable entropy of physics. It's practically impossible to replicate that exact 3D orientation of microscopic flakes.
Right. And then NovaCustom takes high-resolution macro photographs of these uniquely patterned screws right before they put the laptop in the shipping box.
Now, this raises an important question, though. If an intelligence agency is sophisticated enough to intercept your package, couldn't they also intercept the transmission of those verification photos and alter them?
Which our sources show they've anticipated. NovaCustom actually requires you to provide a Proton mail address when you order. The high-res photos are sent to you via end-to-end encrypted Proton mail, so when your laptop arrives, you physically inspect the screws on the case and visually compare their complex 3D glitter patterns against the encrypted photos.
Wow.
If anyone put a screwdriver to that case while it was in transit, the brittle glitter polish would crack, flakes would fall out, and the pattern would be noticeably destroyed.
It's incredible. You combine the physical verification of the glitter screws with the digital cryptographic verification of the NitroKey. The result is absolute proof of chain of custody, with mathematical and physical certainty that no one messed with it.
It's extreme, undeniable attestation. Speaking of physical security in the real world, the sources also highlight an accessory called the bus skill, because imagine you're an executive working in a busy airport terminal, and you're analyzing highly sensitive data. If someone snatches your unlocked laptop right off the table and runs, the software encryption doesn't matter, right? Because the device is already logged in.
Yeah, that is exactly where the bus skill acts as a magnetic deadman switch. You attach a magnetic USB cable from the laptop to your belt or your wrist. If a thief grabs the device and runs, the magnetic cord violently disconnects.
And what does that trigger?
That physical disconnection triggers an immediate pre-configured response. It can instantly lock the screen or force a hard system shutdown, or in really high-risk scenarios, it can securely erase the encryption keys from the RAM in a split second.
Leaving the thief with a beautifully crafted but entirely useless brick.
Exactly. A very expensive paperweight.
We have spent the last 15 minutes exploring some truly incredible technology, but I feel like a major hurdle for enterprise teams or just savvy listeners is actually procuring this specialized hardware without dealing with massive logistical nightmares.
Well, the logistical side is actually heavily supported by NovaCustom's long-term sustainability guarantees. They're a Dutch company, which means users and their data are protected under strict EU privacy jurisdictions.
That's a big plus.
Huge. And they back this hardware with a phenomenal 3-year warranty. Plus, they guarantee a minimum of 7 years of active firmware updates and spare parts. For current models, you are guaranteed support until at least 2030 to 2032, which is vital for enterprise lifecycle planning.
And for listeners in the U.S., purchasing is incredibly streamlined thanks to NovaCustom's authorized U.S. dropship partner, SecurityGadgets.shop. You can go to them directly or find them via the CISO marketplace. But I really want to zero in on the pricing quirk that I found in these sources because it's fascinating.
Yeah, the market economics create a rather unique advantage here. U.S. buyers purchasing through security gadgets actually end up paying roughly 13% less than European buyers for the exact same hardware.
Walk me through the mechanics of how that discount happens.
It all comes down to taxation and currency dynamics. European buyers are subject to the heavy value-added tax, the VAT. U.S. buyers avoid the VAT entirely, and right now they benefit from favorable currency conversion rates.
So they aren't just jacking up the price for the U.S. market?
No. Security Gadget sells at the native U.S. market price without injecting a markup. Plus, for U.S. orders, the hardware is shipped via domestic USPS directly from a U.S. warehouse. This totally eliminates the headaches of import paperwork, customs delays, surprise international tariffs.
That is a massive operational advantage for U.S.-based teams. And for organizations looking to outfit an entire department, Security Gadgets offers dedicated B2B bulk lanes, purchase order procurement, and even compliance mapping to help IT departments justify the hardware controls to their boards. It takes these high-security, open firmware devices and makes them as easy to deploy as off-the-shelf commercial tech.
It totally removes the friction from adopting digital sovereignty.
It really does. And we must give a final reminder. This entire high-end setup, from the Dasharo coreboot to the glitter screws, is the exact package being given away as the second-place prize pack at the CISO.poker tournament.
Such a cool prize.
It really is. So if you're going to be at Hacker Summer Camp at the Wynn in Las Vegas on August 5th, 2026, during the B-Sides, LV, Black Hat, and DEF CON week, you now know exactly what you are playing for.
It's a prize that fundamentally changes how the winner will interact with the digital world.
Absolutely. So to summarize the journey we've mapped out today, we've explored how you can finally excise the invisible vulnerabilities of closed-source vendor biosystems in favor of Dasharo's auditable firmware. We've seen how Zorin OS Pro removes the daunting Linux learning curve.
The muscle memory aspect is just brilliant.
So smart. And how the SHIFTphone 8.1 brings physical kill switches and micro-G anonymity right to your pocket. Plus how the SecurityTitan locks down sensitive data with Qubes OS virtualization and those crazy cryptographically verified anti-tamper screws. A huge thanks again to our sponsor. If you want to explore this hardware for yourself, check the description of this deep dive for direct links to SecurityGadgets.shop, the CISO marketplace, and details on that CISO.poker tournament at the Wynn.
Lots of good links down there.
Definitely. So what does this all mean? I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you look around your environment today. We just spent the better part of 20 minutes discussing how the open source community is capable of securing a laptop down to the cryptographic measurement of the boot sequence and the microscopic randomized pattern of glitter on a single external screw. If we possess that level of verifiable, transparent security for our laptops, what does that say about the millions of proprietary, closed-source, smart appliances, televisions, and speakers that we blindly invite into our living rooms and connect to our networks every single day?
Man, it forces a really severe reevaluation of every microphone and camera we have traded for convenience.
It truly does. Maybe it is time we stop paying to carry around tracking devices and start demanding that we hold the only master key.